If there was a war between the U.S. and Russia, more people in China could die from starvation than in the U.S. and Russia combined.
Survival is going to become the number one most important thing that we will have left if we ever do see a full-blown nuclear war.
What could happen if there was a nuclear attack? Nearly 70% of Americans surveyed by the American Psychological Association said they worry that an invasion in Ukraine could potentially lead to nuclear war. We already discussed part 1 of this topic in yesterday's video. So if you didn't get a chance to see it, we're going to put the link to it right here so you'd be able, or is it over here? So you get a chance to take a look at the part 1 of our video, what would happen if there was a nuclear attack? Now we're going to look at part 2, but before we get started, my name is Andre. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel because you are watching America, We Need to Talk. If you didn't get a chance to see part 1, you might go and watch part 1 right after this video. It's just as informative about what would be the fallout after a nuclear attack.
Survival is going to become the number one most important thing that we will have left if we ever do see a full-blown nuclear war.
If the U.S. or an ally nation were attacked with a nuclear weapon, there's a chance the U.S. would respond with a nuclear attack of its own. The Defense Department runs exercises to try to simulate various military scenarios in order to practice how it would respond. These exercises are called war games.
War games are used by academics, by people in government to basically lay out a scenario that could happen and go through it step by step to see how things might play out.
Sometimes these war games simulate a nuclear attack on either the U.S. or one of its allies. In February 2020, the Pentagon disclosed it had conducted a military exercise which simulated what it called a limited nuclear exchange with Russia. According to a senior Defense Department official, this exercise featured a hypothetical scenario where Russia attacked a NATO territory in Europe. The military personnel undergoing the exercise decided to respond with a nuclear weapon. But these war games don't always end in a nuclear response from the U.S.
The journalist Fred Kaplan reports on a 2016 war game held inside the Obama White House, in which the Russians intervened in one of the Baltic countries, a NATO country, and they used a single nuclear weapon against a NATO airbase trying to end the war. The United States had to decide, what would we do under that circumstance?
Now remember, before he goes any further, these are all simulations, and they did this simulation during the Obama administration, and every president during the Trump administration, as well as all the way back to the Reagan administration, have always done war games. There have been movies about it as well as video games on it, but in a real life scenario, war game practices do play themselves out among the intelligentsia as well as those that are in the military. What if scenarios? Just like in many cases, we have what if scenarios in our regular lives, so it is with this situation. So they are talking about right now, Russia attacked a particular location in the world with a small nuclear weapon. How would the United States respond to that?
They made a decision in the first round that we're going to respond conventionally in a large-scale retaliation, presumably against the base from which the Russians had launched this initial nuclear attack. That, to my mind, was the appropriate thing to do.
So he said that instead of attacking Russia, Moscow, in other words, or any other city there, they said that the wise thing to do if we were going to respond with a nuclear weapon or respond in any particular way with just regular military might, it would be to attack that base in which that weapon was fired from compared to attacking the city or the major towns, because a nuclear weapon does not have to be launched from Russia in order to meet its objective. It could be launched from somewhere else that Russia has military might. Same thing with us in the United States. Our missiles aren't all in the United States. We have them all over the world. So as they were saying, instead of attacking Russia directly, the Obama administration realized the best thing to do was to attack that base in which that weapon came from.
Be tough, firm, but to de-escalate rather than escalate the war.
But in the second round of that war game, military personnel undergoing the exercise reportedly decided to respond with a nuclear exchange.
But when told if the U.S. uses a nuclear weapon on Russian territory, they will consider that to be an attack by the United States and will respond attacking the United States directly. And so in this war game, the principals reportedly chose to use nuclear weapons and targeted them at Belarus rather than Russia, trying to stop escalation, even though Belarus wasn't involved in the initial war game operation.
And that's sad. Just because a country is geographically located next to a country that launched a nuclear weapon, that country had nothing to do with it. America, in their simulation, decided that they would rather launch a nuclear weapon as a warning to Russia by hitting Belarus, which is right by Russia. And I bet you the people of Belarus never knew that this little scenario had taken place.
The president has the sole authority to order the use of nuclear weapons using what is frequently referred to as the nuclear football.
The president is the only person who makes the decision to launch those weapons, and sometimes they have as little as 7 minutes to make that choice, which doesn't really allow for a lot of critical thinking.
President.
Just imagine you're the president of the United States, male or female. Let's put you in this scenario. You got 7 minutes to decide on how to handle a military situation. You, a few years ago, were just a guy that was a senator or a congressman. You didn't even know how to handle that type of might. And so a part of being president of the United States is being the commander in chief, which is the head of the military. You'd have to make decisions in which you have been trained for.
Presidential administrations typically publish a nuclear posture review within the first year in office. This document outlines the White House's policy on the use of nuclear weapons and arms control.
President Biden, as a candidate, said that he supported a policy of sole purpose, which is that the only purpose of nuclear weapons should be to deter the use of nuclear weapons.
As of April 5th, 2022, the Biden administration has not released its nuclear posture review. To get an idea of what to expect from the Biden administration, experts look to the...
Now notice, they just said all presidents within the first year of their term released a nuclear posture report, meaning where they stand, how we will handle situations, the training in which the president has, as well as the meetings that have taken place. And President Biden has yet to have this report released, even though he's in the third year of his term.
While the Obama administration pledged in its posture review to accelerate efforts to prevent nuclear terrorism, it did not go as far as adopting a sole purpose policy.
I think already we were not expecting the Biden administration to adopt this policy of sole purpose because of the current climate, which, even before the actual war was very bad with Russia, as well as concerns about China's growing arsenal and a concern that our allies who rely on us for their defense would be unnerved.
There's a paradox when it comes to nuclear deterrence. Nuclear deterrence works only if an adversary believes that you might actually execute a nuclear attack if you are attacked first. So the U.S. government and other governments practice nuclear war all the time.
Now, just imagine you got countries, you got leaders, presidents that are practicing nuclear war with or at least at each other on a regular basis without us even knowing that this is taking place. And the key to being a nuclear superpower is the threat of another country knowing that you have no problem with pulling the trigger if need be.
So that we are confident that we could retaliate if necessary. That creates an inherent tension because adversaries don't know whether we would only use nuclear weapons in retaliation or whether we might use them first.
The theory of mutually assured destruction has been around for almost as long as nuclear weapons have. And we have been at risk of nuclear war for as long as nuclear weapons have been around.
There have been many efforts to create international agreements in order to reduce risk. The Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons was an international initiative first launched in 1968 by the United Nations. Its goal is to work toward a world without nuclear weapons. A total of 191 states have joined the treaty, including 5 nuclear weapon states.
States agreed to negotiate nuclear disarmament and would also work toward reducing their nuclear arsenals. But that's not happening. On the contrary, actually, all nuclear armed states are continuing to modernize their nuclear arsenals also and spending a lot of money on it as well.
So instead of money going down, instead of curtailing how many weapons that are being made and doing something about the ones that we already have.
The U.S. and Russia also signed a separate agreement in 2010 called the New START Treaty.
It's a treaty that's still in force today. And in fact, that is the only treaty right now that regulates and limits U.S. and Russian nuclear forces. 18 times a year, United States inspectors go to Russian territory and, literally look at their strategic nuclear weapons and vice versa. Now, these inspections have been paused because of COVID, but not because of the political situation. And in fact, I think that the inspections will be resuming soon. And there are other means of, verification provided for in the treaty, including we send each other notifications every time a delivery vehicle, a plane, a sub, an ICBM that's mobile, if it leaves the place where it normally is, we send an instant notification to Russia. So we have complete pictures at all times of where each side's nuclear weapons are.
I personally would like to see the United States move towards a no first use policy. I just think this is not the time to be doing that right now, given this particular crisis. I do think that we should say that we will respond appropriately. We will never target civilian targets, and that we will use our nuclear forces against military targets only in response to grave threats to national security.
I am not.
It is literally impossible to drop a nuclear weapon in a location where, for example, Tampa, Florida, there's a major Air Force base there. You cannot drop a nuclear weapon at that Air Force base there in Tampa, Florida, MacDill's. Shout out to all you military guys, MacDill's Air Force Base, and not impact South Tampa, downtown Tampa, central Tampa, all the way down to Wesley Chapel and Bradenton area. All of you guys that live in Tampa know exactly what I'm talking about.
Not saying that nuclear war would end the world. It would just end the world as we know it. But humans are resilient creatures, and we know how to work together when we have to.
We're going to end it right there. That was an excellent way in which she said, we know how to work together when we have to. Hopefully, our governments come together and work together, because right now, they really have to. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. My name is Andre. I'll see you in the next video. And you are watching America, We Need to Talk.